I often take flights from London, UK to the west coast of the US, and it's really long flight. So I have time to think about stuff. When I'm bored, I look through the window, and by the time I settle in my seat, the UK is already gone. So I just like stare into the Atlantic, and and then I think that this island is really fucking small. Basically, like when you compare it to the whole world, it's tiny. But the British, they conquered half of the world. So I think it's like an interesting phenomena, and just like why how comes they were so good at it? So like obviously one reason is that like everything was better basically than at home for the British. They had women were prettier in any other country. Food was better and the weather was better. But for the people who are being conquered, it must have been crap, because like the people who are conquering them were, not only were they now conquered, but they were ruled by really, ugly people, like ugly, freckly people. So it must have sucked. If you're like in India, you are like now, oh man, at least before I was like ruled by some other guy from, like some, like Mongol or something. But now I'm ruled by this like horrible ginger guy. Like what the fuck? Like how can it get worse than that? Um, yeah, it sucked. And then Greenland comes up, which is like white plate of shit, and it's like just white. And I think about Eskimos boning each other, then makes me horny. Yeah, like I remember this book Ragtime. There was like a description of Eskimos, and because it's so cold, they would have these, they would have like these crotch slits in their fur coats, and when they would want to have sex, they just like pull their stuff out. I mean, obviously just a guy, um, and they would have this like mad, passionate sex on the ice, and I think it's really amazing. Maybe because I really like Asians and Eskimos. I like Asians. But apart from the Eskimo shit, like the whole flight over Greenland, I think it's really cool. Because you have like light shining from above, but then from below you have this reflection of the ice, and it's just like infinite void of light, and it just like light floods you completely. And I think it's probably something like near-death experience would feel like, it just be like flooded by the light. And then you see just lots of wood. And then you're in Canada now. And when I fly over Canada, I usually think about Lenin and communism. Because like that dude, he did it in Russia, but then he failed. But if he did it in Canada, I think it would have worked. Because that country is like inherently communist. Because if you live in Canada, you have the same shit that your, closest neighbor 50 miles away from you has, which is, 1,000 hectares of pine wood. And everyone is same, everyone is proletariat. He would have just have to, he would have like planted pine wood in the 3% of the country which is not wood, and that wouldn't be that. Everyone would be the same, So, and then you get to the Canada southern neighbor, which is definitely not a communist country, and geography is much more diverse. There's all kinds of shit, but I usually think like about other stuff, like why do they torture people? Just like silly questions like that. And I also think, how it feels for the people who are being tortured. Like they closed Abu Ghraib now, but they still torture people in other places. That there were other secret prisons like in Poland and Lithuania. These were closed, but there are some others. And like these people who were imprisoned in Abu Ghraib, almost all of them were innocent. They were just like random people they picked from the street, like taxi drivers and shit. And I'm just thinking, like, if you're being tortured, it must be like 1,000 times easier if you're tortured for a reason, because you have you have power in the process. You can be, I'll tell you, my secret, or you can be like, no, I'll be strong, fuck you, I'll keep my secret as long as I can. Eventually you'll tell it anyway, but at least maybe then they will stop torturing you. But for these people, it was like they could have made up secrets, but they would torture them anyway. Because, they were just a bunch of sadistic pricks who are really bored. So there was not much they could have done. And the interesting thing is, like, even though Americans, they have one of the best constitutions in the world, and like in my opinion, it's better than any constitution of any European country, like apart from maybe Switzerland, because actually in Switzerland people are required to keep like their military grade, I mean military issued weapons at home, all the time, which I think is like, I think it like symbolizes the freedom of a country. The more freedom a country has, the less government is afraid of its own people, so it doesn't like stockpile weapons and keeps them from the people. But yeah, I mean, they have like in U.S. Constitution there are two amendments which are the most important ones, and like the first one is freedom of speech, and the second one is just designed to protect the first one, which grants the people a right to bear arms. But like the Americans, they didn't give shit, most of the Americans don't give shit about the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. It's just like government's just taking civil liberties, and like one example is when I tried to buy a SIM card, and I had to fill in all these forms and shit and give my ID, and not because I was foreigner, just like everybody has to do it. And the guy who was working there, he seemed quite reasonable, so I complained that it was unnecessary. Well, like, why do you have to give all this personal information just to buy a fucking SIM card? But he thought it was actually good, because he said, like, if someone was building a bomb and he wanted to detonate it remotely, he could use his mobile phone, and this would prevent him. So I'm trying to imagine this guy who's like, obviously he has some he has some skills, and he's really persistent because he has to have some chemistry skills. He has to make explosives out of fertilizer, and he has to have some electronic skills because he has to make a fucking detonator. And now he has a working bomb, and he'll go like, oh fuck, I can't get a SIM card legally. Oh fuck that, I'm not gonna do it. I can't deal with that.